My name is Tjeerd Krumpelman. I work for ABN AMRO, and I have the privilege to moderate this session on assurance. Assurance of what everybody keeps calling non-financial data. Even the CFO just now kept calling it non-financial data. I would make a strong case to call it, I heard yesterday the term not yet financial data, and I like that one. Within ABN AMRO, I like to use pre-financial data, because then our finance people will wake up and get to their jobs of value creation. So we have a lovely panel here, which I'll introduce shortly. And the topic of today is, or of this panel, is how can insurance help improve the quality of pre-financial data? That's misspelled in the agenda. It should be pre-financial data. So companies are increasingly being asked to disclose more data. We talked about this yesterday a lot as well. The constant push for more data, and we'll talk about that. And we need to be confident that the data that we are disclosing and the impacts that they can be reported in a constant manner. So how can assurance help on that? So on this panel, we first have Hilde Blomme from Accountancy Europe. Then we have Mandy Kirby. She'll introduce herself because she just changed roles. And we have Gerge Jansar from Mol Group. A warm welcome. Your first thoughts, Hilde, on this topic?
Good morning to everybody. Well, on assurance, we will use pre-financial data for today. That's not normally on the European level. In Brussels, the name for non-financial information that we use. We think, I represent Accountancy Europe, I represent accountants and auditors, so obviously you would expect that we would say, of course, you need assurance on pre-financial information because it improves the quality. And it's not because that brings us business, but it's because we believe that this actually can improve the quality, because there is a growing demand for trust, for reliability, for credibility in reporting, also on pre-financial information and sustainability data. And why is that? Because, as I think it became very clear from our previous speaker, this is because this data is more and more used in the decision-making in the company. It's not just something that is for reporting purpose, it is something that is more and more used within the company. And our professional accountants and auditors, we think we're well equipped to do that, to provide such assurance, because and I think that's something that sometimes is a little bit ignored. To do that assurance, there is a lot of experience you can actually get from the financial reporting and the financial reporting assurance or audit that you can use, because that makes assurance techniques, how you can actually provide this assurance. And as a profession, we use professional standards, including ethical standards, which we believe is important. Now, there are three things which we think, even though the end game might be assurance, that are very important before a company considers to get into assurance. If a company wants to have assurance on their pre-financial information reporting, they will normally, before they go into that request, they will beef up their reporting themselves. They will make it more robust, and in itself, that's already quite a good goal. And it will also make them focus on what is the subject matter now of my reporting. Is it the whole pre-financial information reporting? Is it just part of it? And it will also make them focus, if it's the whole of it, how will we deal with making this a balanced reporting, the positives and the negatives. So that's something that is a good exercise for a company to go through as well. And it will also make a company focus on what is the best framework to use for that reporting, because there are thousands of frameworks out there. So for my company, for my pre-financial reporting, what is the best one? What is the most suitable one? And in itself, we think that that is a very beneficial exercise for a company to go through, even before they would then say, well, we have gone through those steps. We think we're ready to ask for assurance on that. So that would be our take.
Thank you, Hilde. Mandy.
Thank you. Am I closer? So Just as a very quick introduction, I've spent the last almost 5 years working at the Principles for Responsible Investment, and there I was responsible for all of our almost 2,000 members' annual reporting process, so gathering lots and lots of data from investors and service providers on their responsible investment practices. And I'm not in that role anymore, but I can still talk very competently about it because I'm involved in lots of other work related to this, particularly around the development of British standards on sustainable finance. Looking at it from the investor perspective, because we were running a big reporting process, we wanted to understand a little bit more about the assurance and verification practices that they were going through. And really one of the end goals of that was to try and bring the companies in and the investors a bit closer together in understanding the data they were looking at. So through our annual survey, we asked all of our investors what we ended up calling them assurance, verification, or confidence-building measures they were using on the data they were reporting into us, not just for our reporting purposes, but any other sustainability-related information. And the reason for that was that even though everybody was very keen to talk about assurance, we found that it was a very much abused term, and they weren't really talking about assurance in itself. They usually meant they'd done some kind of internal audit, or the CEO had signed off something, or someone else had looked over it. They didn't really mean assurance, and there wasn't a good understanding of what that was. So we did a big survey, which we've continued to do every year, to understand what they thought assurance meant. And I think it's not really surprising to find that we found the majority of investors were actually only going through an internal verification process with their information. And only a handful of them were doing any kind of third-party external insurance, just around 10%. And we also asked them the main standards they were using, and the key one that kept coming up with was ISA 3000. And then there were some other ISO standards and accounting standards in there, and some were using GRI frameworks. But really, the upshot of it was that it wasn't a very robust process. Leading on from that, we split it into two different groups. One was a group who did have good processes and did have a good understanding of the practices, but they didn't think that it applied to non-financial information. And the other were ones that really didn't have very good practices for financial or non-financial information. And we found that we had to treat those two differently in terms of the kind of coaching and recommendations. But it really fell back to something that came up yesterday as well, which was thinking a lot about the internal processes and the internal control processes first, getting those right, making sure that the data collection was robust and that the reporting was clear. And then we also looked at it from another aspect, which was really kind of putting our gaze away from the type of people that are in this room, the type of experts that are in this room, and thinking about the broader profession, and a bit of a concern amongst assurance practitioners that they really knew how to deal with this data, and the feeling that there was a big amount of education that had to happen there to give them the confidence, because by nature they're quite, they have high standards, very high professional standards, and this wasn't something they wanted to go into feeling like they didn't really have all of the information that they needed. So we've got a couple of publications on the PRI website that go into some details on that, and there's further work planned.
Okay, thank you. Gerge, your first thoughts on this subject?
Yes. So I'm here from the corporate side. Actually, I'm working for MOL Group, as Gerard already mentioned. It is a medium-sized integrated oil and gas company. The headquarters is in Hungary. And assurance in itself is an especially important topic for myself, because I joined this company 6 years ago. But before that, I used to work for Deloitte on the assurer side. So I delivered sustainability assurance projects for clients, including my current company. And I think that assurance is important, it's changing a lot, and it needs to change a lot. Maybe just a couple of words about this. About why is assurance important, I wouldn't go in details, because I think this is a topic that we could go for hours, but maybe just one thought. So we discussed a lot about that. Sustainability data is important, but the underlying processes are even more important. However, I think that the result or the outcome of the assurance, of an assurance finding, can very often be that the underlying processes will be improved, because you cannot get data, good quality data, without the good process in itself. So even in our company, for example, I worked a lot with the communications, the social investment team, because the community engagement, social investment data quality was not good enough. We had to bring this issue several times to the Sustainability Committee of the Board of Directors, but the result was not that only the data was corrected, but the result was that there was a new process built up on managing this whole topic, and as a result getting good quality data. So this is, I think, something that we shouldn't forget about, that the sustainability data assurance is not only about the data itself, but it is about the processes that we have in the company. About how much sustainability assurance changed, at least I think we on corporate side all have our journeys. Our journey in the last 5 years was that originally our assurance, which is delivered by EY, by the way, but this is not the place for advertisement, was very much focused on the data, and we wanted to put some more focus on the processes, internal processes as well. So we introduced the AA 1000, for example, as a framework used for assurance. We introduced not only data assurance, but also the assurance of qualitative claims. I don't know if you have experience with this. And what is even more important, we continuously tried to improve the team on the assurance provider side. And for example, we every year ask the assurance provider to bring in some experts from foreign offices to have some benchmark, some external view on our processes. And just as a final thought, how much or what is the, or how much sustainability assurance should change, or these changes that, for example, we made in the last couple of years are enough or not. I think they are not. I think assurance, together with everything what is sustainability, should change even more. And just as an example, again from our operations, so 10 years ago, when I used to provide assurance for this same company, but I work now, when we visited the investor relations department asking about sustainability, their answer was that our company was on the emerging markets, and sustainability from an investor point of view is just not important in the emerging markets. 5 years ago, when I joined the company, the investor relations department was very much engaged. They said that they support everything what we do, but still they said that it is not as important, for example, to have an ESG roadshow, something like this. And today, my colleague who is a sustainability expert or senior expert in my team, for example, he cannot be here because he is doing ESG investor visits together with the head of the investor relations department in Europe. So I think the world is changing a lot in sustainability, and I think assurance and as well should change, and even more faster than we can see it now. Just one thought about it, which is my personal question, let's say, is that in the big four companies, who are the biggest assurance providers, sustainability assurance is still on the consulting side very much, and not on the assurance side. I think this is a big question. I mean, if it should change or not.
Okay. Thank you, Gerge. So these are the views from the panel, and now we would like to get your views. So if we could put up Slido, the poll, click to the poll. We have prepared several questions. We'll start with one, but in total we have 5. And this is the first one, and we've tried to make easy, well, maybe not easy questions, but it's only a yes or no question. So the question to you is assurance improving the quality of pre-financial reporting? I often learned if it's not a good question, it's a good question if it splits the room in half, so this is definitely not a good question then. Thank you. I like what Gerge also said about, and this is a link to the previous speaker, of the iceberg, right? So you see on the assurance or on the reporting side the tip of the iceberg, but the intent should be to improve the processes that are sometimes below the surface. So I would say, okay, we have about 50 votes in. Assurance is definitely improving the quality of non-financial reporting. And maybe Hilde, can I ask you, from an accountancy perspective, do you agree on this?
Well, obviously I could potentially not agree with that, but we definitely agree with that. I think that's in line with what I already said for the reasons that I already mentioned. But, you know, I think it is something that is not yet very well spread. It's market-led, and that's fine. And it's, as you said, it's a journey, and it's a journey that has started, but there is still a lot to be done to actually make it more robust, to develop it better. For instance, for the moment, we know that the ISAE 3000 standard is being considered to be made more specific for pre-financial information reporting. We have done work with the World Business Council on Sustainable Development on that. The IWSB, the standard setter, has a grant for that. You know, there is work to be done to actually to go basically from there and to make it more widespread, to make it more robust, and also, and I think you are also right on that, within our profession or within the providers of that assurance, to actually have this being as a service that they offer, in which they are themselves more confident, in which they are more knowledgeable, in which it's you know, it's more embedded within the work they do rather than something to the side. So in our profession, we're the first to admit there is a lot of work to be done.
Thank you. The no is moving up a little, so we have about 10 no-sayers in the room, and I would love to get some feedback on that. So would anybody like to speak out, specifically saying, well, I don't see this assurance as improving the quality of the report? We could get the voters' names from the Slido people, right? But there is 10 of you in the room, so I think one of you, we'll get free drinks. Yes, thank you. GRI at the table.
Can I take off my GRI hat? I'm just coming out. I was one of the no's. And before joining GRI, I was working in a company, and we got the report externally assured. And the way that I saw that the assurance was done was not really pushing us that much up in terms of issuing quality data. It was very much about the process, which was, you know, great, and it's fine, but I still see a big room for improvement in terms of the standards for external verification. And if I can put back my GRI hat, you know, we do recommend external assurance because indeed, you know, it helps. But you know, seeing, you know, the 90 whatever it was % when I opened the app, I felt, okay, maybe we need to counterbalance to say, it's not that straightforward. It's not that if you get your external assurance on the report, then the quality really raises to the sky. So I think, you know, there is still a pledge that is out there about improving the standards on assurance.
Yeah.
So don't quote me on this.
Is that more of a not yet then? Like
Yeah.
Because I think that the work that has been underway from the standard setters, for example, the IWSB and their work on emerging forms of external reporting, it's a really good signal to the market that it's been taken more seriously, but it's going to take some years before that becomes embedded. And I guess the question right now is, can we afford to wait for that process, the regulatory process, to kick in when the Big Four are undertaking a lot of the work? They're maybe looking at, they're the ones that are influencing the direction of travel at the moment, because they're the ones that are looking for the work and trying to replicate it. So there's a bit of a mess at the moment when the actual standardization part hasn't happened, and that's going to take quite a few more years before it's embedded.
practice might be more advanced to the standards that exist, but that's also what makes the standards change in the end. So I think it's a process that feeds each other.
Yeah, and there was another good point in your feedback, so thank you for that, because if you ask for assurance on, let's say, irrelevant non-financials, so water usage, I mentioned the example, yeah, water usage in bank buildings or in this, then you will get it probably, but it's not adding value for any stakeholder or not improving anything. So that's a very valid point, and I think that the ambition of companies or the aspiration of companies should be reflected in their request for assurance. And often I see a lot of, let's say, not the easy way out, but a lot of lower ambitions, because the importance of getting the assurance is set higher on the agenda than actually the ambition of improving the process. Okay, good. Let's go to the next one, please. The next Slido question, number 2. Maybe we'll get some feedback from GRI again on this one, but we do not need any more reporting frameworks. So it's a double negative. We do not need any more. So if you agree, then you agree that we have sufficient, and if you say no, then you are looking for a new framework. And then, okay, so the numbers are coming in, 30, yeah. Mandy, I would be curious from your experience also at PRI, what you think of this, and be prepared. Either a yes or a no sayer. I will point you out in a minute and get your views of that from the audience. But Mandy, you first, please.
Yeah, we probably don't need any more. Having been the owner of an incredibly large reporting framework, it's a bit hypocritical of me to say that there's too much reporting. But yeah, I don't think we need any more new frameworks. I think we need clearer guidance. So, for example, the guidance coming through from ISA 3000, which will allow the better types of data to be assured. I think there's a need for better guidance on the types of assurance that are available, be it process or on the quality of the data. And I think that, you know, it's kind of boring, but it just goes back to each company going and looking at what data and reporting they're doing is most useful and making sure that it reflects better their activities. I have a bit of a concern with some non-financial data, that some of the things that we measure at the moment, we do so because we know how to measure those things. So it's not necessarily that we need new frameworks, but we might need to just go back and make sure that we're doing carbon footprinting because it's giving us something meaningful in return, rather than just that's the thing that we know how to do at the moment. And I don't know if we have enough information to be a good judge of that at the moment.
Gerge, from a business perspective, do you need any more frameworks?
I wouldn't push yes on this. So I think we need, or at least I understand the reason why we have more and more reporting frameworks. And I think the reason is very simple, because the current reporting frameworks are far from perfect, which is normal. So I think we need more, but I think what we also need in parallel with this is some consolidation. So the more reporting framework is not the solution, better reporting frameworks or more advanced reporting frameworks are the solution. And I think that, again, so this I consider as a normal journey, but of course it causes some confusion on the reporting side, because now we are at the point, I would say again, when all the companies have to comply with a lot of requirements, and it makes sustainability very reporting heavy, let's say.
I think it's very important. If there are so many frameworks, you know, it would be good that there is coordination, cooperation, and eventually, as you said, consolidation between at least the main ones and the most important ones, because that would be useful, I think, for the companies.
Any response from the audience? Any thoughts someone wants to share on this question? Yes, Donato. Thank you.
Hello, Donato from Datamaran, and I'm among the no's. Although I think there are a lot of frameworks out there, but still we need more. We need better. Especially in terms that, and I think that Accountancy Europe will appreciate it. So this is what I'm about to say. My background is accounting, and I think more than frameworks, which are more or less lists of indicators companies should disclose on, we really need an accounting of pre-financial dimensions, and we need harmonization, not much among different frameworks, but between pre-financial accounting and financial accounting. There's a lot to be connected there, especially in the perspective of integrated thinking.
Okay, thank you. So consolidation, but also joining the forces with the financial frameworks, which have developed over a much longer period, right? I think we are at IFRS 17 or something now. I've lost count, but they keep developing as well. Any other thoughts from the audience? No? Okay, let's go to the next question. Question number 3. The link of these 2 days is also, of course, with regards to Sustainable Development Goals. And the question on the table is, do we need development on the assurance of SDG reporting?
We should have had some exciting music for this.
Yeah? Yeah, some scary tunes. Yeah. Hilde, what are your thoughts on SDG reporting assurance?
Well, I think that's even more difficult than the general discussion about assurance on pre-financial information reporting. And, you know, when we discussed that question, I thought, what about first reporting on SDGs? And I found a KPMG report from earlier this year, and they looked at the largest 250 companies in the world, and they looked at how they were doing on SDG reporting. And they looked at 3 indicators. I simplify a little bit: understanding of the goals, prioritization within the company, and then the measuring of them. And they did give grades as to how it was done from A to D. D wasn't very good, A was very good. And in the understanding and in the prioritization, they had on each time 3 criteria. Only on 1 there was an A, and all the rest was C or D. On the measurement, it was only D or C. So if you look at it, the reporting on SDGs is still needing a lot of improvement and development. So I think this is first where you focus before you would get to assurance and to say, yes, you need assurance. And I think the results here behind us make that visible, that that's also how people look at that.
So you would say that first SDG reporting needs development, and then after that we will have an opportunity perhaps to assure on that, right? That should be,
I do agree, but I think that it's helpful when going through the SDG reporting process to be mindful that assurance could be coming at a later date, to make sure that that process is robust enough. And I believe that Pietro was talking yesterday about a great guide for companies to be able to refer to in terms of how to go about identifying, because I think even the prioritization, I'm not sure that all companies are doing particularly well, making sure that what they're reporting on is relevant to them as a company. And if you don't get that part of it right, then whatever reporting you're doing is not going to be as meaningful, and then therefore that's going to impact on the assurance process at the end of it.
Gary, any thoughts from you on this SDG part?
Generally, I agree. I agree that first the reporting needs some improvement. Even if I speak about our company, we need to improve in SDG reporting. But also, I think what I'm always saying about SDG, that I think it would be a good help for companies if there were sector guidelines and sector targets for SDGs. This is what could really help strategies and reporting on SDGs. Otherwise, I'm afraid that it will be just this labeling type of reporting for a good while.
Yeah, good point. Again, any thoughts from the audience on this SDG reporting and assurance? Maybe a best practice to share? Someone's read a report that's been assured or something, or should be? Yes? Hurry up, Ed.
Just a thought about sustainability reporting in general as it applies to assurance. Even though SDGs are still, we're all starting to get our head around how to do it and how to do it right. I think anything in the report, it's a corporate book of record. There's a fiduciary responsibility for it to be as accurate as possible. I think everything should be assured. Processes, reporting mechanisms, data, assertions, it should be elevated to the level of a financial report. And part of that is also internal behavior change and educating. You have some person, you know, in a line and they're like, why is corporate asking me to put this data point in? I don't know what this is. Here you go. So it's the insurance side, but it's also internally behavior change and education. Thank you.
Thank you. I completely agree. So the disciplinary effect, the internal disciplinary effect of having assurance really keeps out all kinds of nonsense, right? Okay, good point. Let's go to question number 4, and this is, I'm very curious of what you all think about it, also in light of the discussions we had yesterday. I'll wait for Slido to... Less is more with regards to data. So I'll just wait for your votes, and but in the meantime, share my own views on this. And I said a little about it yesterday already. I think that I see that there is a demand, a high demand for data, for more data. Yesterday we talked a lot about transparency. I should have counted the number of times that the word transparency was mentioned yesterday. I think it has clear status. But transparency should only be, in my view at least, should only be adding value to data points or topics that are truly value creating or truly material to the company. And data just because we have the data. So in our company we have a very strong facility management department, and they manage they measure all kinds of data points. HR departments, the same thing, they manage and have all kinds of data points, and it seems tempting to share that data. We can get assurance on it easily because there's strict rules and procedures on reporting it, but is it adding value for any stakeholder to know what the exact age breakdown of all employees per country, per business line, per year, with year-on-year delta actually is? I don't think so, but it is tempting sometimes to share that type of data because there was one NGO asking for it with regards to diversity or whatever. So that would be my viewpoint, but and I see the room is a bit split on this, so there's a lot of people ruling for more data. Any thoughts from the panel on this?
We would say normally it's not only about quantity, it's about quality. I think that's important, and there is an element of target, of materiality that should come into this. But in itself, there's nothing wrong with gathering data. It's not necessarily the purpose that all of this is made public and is made public as something that is important. So I think it depends what you look at as far as data, what you want to do with it. It might be very useful to have the data you just referred to for certain specific purposes within the company that you might not be clear to you, but maybe others are interested, so that's fine. But is that something you would want to have in the annual report of the company? Potentially not. So I think there's a difference there.
Okay, thank you. Mandy, any additional thoughts?
Yeah, we went through a review of our reporting framework to see which bits of it were assurable, and went through a similar sort of thought process to you, which was that we can definitely assure these pieces of information, where is your headquarters, that kind of thing, but it's not adding any value. So we needed to be really clear about what we thought the goal of our reporting was, and for any assurance to be related to that goal and make sure it was helping to promote the objective of our reporting. And I like the comment that you said yesterday, something along the lines of, if everything is transparent, nothing is visible. I thought it was a really good way of putting it, and it's like this internet age and social media and everything. There is much more availability, easier to demand information, But you still then need that level of analysis on the top of it, and it's the company's job to do that level of analysis and to say, this is the story that we need to tell as a business. We've determined our stakeholders, we know what we're doing, because everything else is just noise.
And do you see a role for the assurance provider to say, this is not material information, I'm not even going to assure this data because it's not value creating?
I think that's a really difficult position to put them in, because it's expecting them to do the work that the company should be doing. Mm-hmm. They should definitely be well enough equipped to look and see at the process that the company has done and say, you've done a good job there and that's fine. But I don't think it should be up to the assurers to make that decision on their behalf.
Gergely, any thoughts from you?
I think I would just join to what you said, maybe from some different angles. So the first thing is what you mentioned about the human resources data. I fully agree that even we are, I think, disclosing hundreds of data points every year on human resources, but also my question would be that if we agree on that this doesn't necessarily help the evaluation or the assessment of a company, then are we sure that we are disclosing everything that would help? For example, employee turnover is always a big question for me. I mean, what is the healthy turnover rate? But what would be more important is that what is the turnover rate from your critical stuff, right? The critically important stuff. And I don't see reporting framework moving into this direction very fast. The other thing is the quality from 2 points of view. One is that if, for example, rating agencies or analysts are asking data that only they are requesting, so maybe we can provide data, but what will be the quality, right? This is the question. And joining to assurance, I'm pretty sure that all the companies have a scope of data that they ask assurance for, and these kind of standalone requests are not within this scope, certainly, or very often. Maybe just this.
Yeah, thank you. I would be curious from the audience who would think that more is more with data. So who would have answered no to this poll and thinks that we actually need more data. And again, I can get your names from Slido. Yes, thank you, in the back. Yeah.
Thanks, Fiona Lyons from Biome. I think my thoughts are along the lines of what Hilda's saying. There's a difference between collecting data and then having the intelligence and the ability to go in and analyze it and query it and to get the insights. And that's the difference between what you're collecting and then what you're reporting. Okay. But I think, you know, the technologies that are available now and what can be done with data is very powerful, and I think we should embrace that and you know, use those technology tools to get the best out of our data, be able to query it, analyze it, and get insights.
And then would you make that choice of what to put out there? Would you leave it up to the company, or would you leave it up to the external stakeholder? So give him what's it often called, the lake of data, or the sea, or the ocean. I don't know what the proper term is, but give them all the data that you have, and let them use techniques to mine that data, or would you make that conscious choice from a company standpoint?
Yeah, I think as Mindy was saying, that's the company's job. They need to decide. They're the ones that can make the most out of those insights to understand it and decide what's important.
Because a lot of investors will say, just give us the data and we'll decide what we think is important. But I think the viewpoint is that it's up to the company to decide what is valuable data to share. Okay. Any other thoughts? Thank you. Yes, one on the other side in the back. Ed, in front of the technicians. Yeah.
Thank you. My name is Famke Schaap. I'm with Deloitte Belgium. With regards to data, what we see currently with our clients, for example, that data is available on risks and compliance, for example. It's challenging, but one area where I feel personally there's a lot of progress to be made, and perhaps not going it alone, but really in a collaborative manner, is data on impact. So especially those companies that are engaged in a very complex supply chain, automotive or electronics, for example, there's a lot of information out there upstream I'm thinking about, for example, NGO reports, health and safety reports, mines, agriculture, fields. The information is there, but it's not collected. It's not possible to go and collect that on your own as a company. It's too burdensome, too costly, and maybe too risky as well. It'd be very interesting to hear a bit more from the audience, perhaps, if there are any thoughts on how to work with data on impact. And we do work with companies on data in impact, also in using technology, obviously, but yeah, the way forward is collaborative efforts, networked approach, I believe.
Yeah. Yeah, so the holy grail of measuring impact outcomes, etc., and then having data and targets and KPIs on that, and then having assurance on it even, yeah, I think it'll take some time. But any maybe a best practice from the audience, someone or from the panel. I don't have one top of mind, but I like the work that DSM is doing on it. I like the work that BASF is doing on it. From a reporting perspective, so the environmental profit and loss statements or the integrated profit and loss statements that some companies are providing, but I've not really seen assurance on it. So there is data, but there's not yet assurance. Maybe any other examples? Otherwise, we'll meet you in the coffee break and see if we can share. Because okay, so I'll leave it at that. I want to go to the last question, also conscious of time, and I think this is a nice one to end this session on. And the question is, should assurance become a mandatory requirement? And then obviously we mean assurance on pre-financials, right? So on sustainability data or pre-financial data or not yet financial data. I get confused myself sometimes, yeah. Okay, well, this is then the best statement or polling so far, because we really split the room here. It would be tempting for me to ask Hilde, but it's always questionable if you ask accountants if it should be mandatory, because it's kind of an earnings model as well, right? So this is, but I'll ask you anyway, yes.
Okay, but my answer would be not yet.
Oh, not yet,
So,
okay.
And why? And there I think you have to go again to the reporting. In Europe, there is now a first year of experience, of practice, 2017 on, and it is non-financial information reporting because of the directive. There are about 12,000 companies that had to do this in 2017. A lot of them for the first time. And so it is quite clear that a lot of them, they struggled with what is this, how should I do this, what is the reporting framework that I should use, and they were not necessarily ready to have all the data, to have all the processes, to have all the systems in place to do this from the first time. So they will get better and better as they have 2-3 years of experience. So it's again, I think our answer is not yet, because we think the reporting needs to get more robust and grow a little bit. I don't think you want to go into a company and say, and now you have to have assurance on that, if the reporting is still evolving. And so eventually, potentially, will we push for this? Not necessarily, because we think it's good that things are market-led, because oftentimes it means there's more innovation. And once something is mandated, it's standardized, it can become quite stale. So it's not necessarily your preferred solution.
It's a journey, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Mandy, I think maybe you have a different view on, I don't know.
My view is, if we're going to talk about the Holy Grail, I'm going to talk about the dream, not until it's part of the standard financial reporting.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so first integrate it into the standard financial reporting, make it part of IFRS or something. Yeah, okay.
Could be some time away.
Yeah. Well, next year.
We should have reporting on, and assurance on corporate reporting, financial and other, not split, and I think that's important as well, that eventually it comes together and then you don't split, you do it all together.
And there's a big role to play for auditors, a big journey for auditors there as well. Gerge, any thoughts from you on this? Should it be mandatory?
My personal opinion is that above a certain size, yes, so it should be. So I personally cannot imagine public reporting without getting assurance on it.
Okay. Okay, so it's time to wrap up this session. Thank you very much to the panel. I'll try and summarize it a little. It is a journey, that's where we started. It needs to be adding value to the value creation. Assurance will keep out the nonsense. That's some of the stuff that we said. It helps to build confidence. It should be clear. The underlying process that was mentioned a lot, so the disciplinary effect of good assurance. And there is the starting point of good assurance is the company itself. It's not the assurance providers. It's the company themselves that need to improve and show ownership of the data. I would be in favor of full assurance on everything that you put out there. So, because if you have thought about it and consider it to be important, then you should be man or woman enough to get assurance on it. And if it's important, then you want it to be right, and you want someone else to say that it's right as well, and that you have followed a good process of doing so. So before I end this session, the next session will be hosted by Ewan Murray from the Sustainability Consortium. And again, thanks to this lovely panel, and thanks to you as well for providing the answers. Thank you.